you become? What is your character? You're an angry person. Okay, so the anger is an unskillful thought. You've probably, because you're angry, you've done a lot of bad things in the world. But that's not the end of it for you, because it's all coming back to you. Every time you're angry, you're suffering. Angry people are deeply in suffering. Luckily, anger doesn't last very long. It kind of flares up. But while it's flaring up, you're suffering. When you develop an angry habit, you're suffering a lot, because the same thing comes up over and over again. If you have an angry character, basically you are living in that anger and you cannot get rid of it. So there's a lot of suffering just from the experience of anger. But it doesn't end there. One of the things is you will start to look like an angry person. Your face will visibly change. You know, your eyebrows will point down, and you will have a big frown. You'll find it impossible to smile. And so these are aspects of an angry person. When you start looking like that, and people see you, also you get kind of a red face, especially people European descent who have light skin. You see when they get angry, they turn red. So when people see you, they walk the other way. They avoid you, because people don't like to be around angry people. Pretty soon you don't have very many friends. But that's not the end of your anger. Pretty soon your health is suffering. You get high blood pressure from being angry all the time, and then your heart gets weak, and you may have a heart attack. So all of these things build up. And so this is the aspect of an angry character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny. Now in Buddhism we usually assume that after this life we will be born in another life. And the idea, in Buddhism they talk about, there's two steps involved. If you look at dependent co-arising, paticca samuppada, that before rebirth is bhava. Bhava is what you've become, it's becoming. And bhava determines your rebirth. That means that you, as an angry person living right here, will feel already in this world that you are living in a hell realm. Everything will be unsatisfactory. Nothing will make you happy. And so, according to Buddhist cosmology, if you're reborn, you will be born in the hell realm. So that comes from anger. So this is the effect of karma. We can't actually, in our experience, until we die, we can't actually trace it through to the next life. But we can certainly trace it to the point of becoming. And we can observe people in this life who have become angry people, and they do it through their karma. They do it through every little decision they make. If they can change their karma, which the Buddha tells us any of us can, rather than acting out of the anger, when the anger arises, don't act. Wait for it to subside, and then find that kind mind, and act on the basis of kindness. That's how you change your anger around. Okay? So this is very important to keep in mind. So you want to look at the kusala and the akusala. The kusala is good. It actually in Pali means skillful. And akusala is unskillful. This idea of skillful and unskillful is very useful when you're thinking about this. In Buddhist practice, we're learning a skill. We're learning the skill of life. You can think of different things you can learn a skill about. You can learn to be a very good cook. You can learn to do pottery. You can learn to be a good athlete. And whenever you're learning a skill, there's always a good thing to learn the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And if you have a teacher, they'll tell you. If you're learning to cook, the teacher will tell you, this is sugar, this is salt. Don't mix them up. They'll teach you things like that. And when you listen to the teacher, then you will learn the skill. And you will become better and better at cooking the more you do it right. It'll become natural to you. It's the same thing, riding a bicycle, learning to do pottery, learning to play the piano. You learn the right way to do it, and then it becomes natural. You become a very good piano player, and not only are you giving pleasure to other people, but the benefit is coming back to you. People appreciate your piano playing. You have a sense of accomplishment. It makes you feel good to be a good piano player. And it's the same thing with learning the skill of virtue. You feel really great when you learn that skill. You feel personally very good. It brings kind of an inner happiness, a glow to you. But people around you notice it, and they become very appreciative. So they will be very kind to you in return. So what you do, your karma actually does come back to you in a very straightforward way that you can observe. There are a lot of ways when we talk about karma. I do a bad thing, act disrespectfully to my mother or something, and then I go outside and I get hit by lightning. Those are kind of dramatic statements of karma. If you look at the suttas, you find very few of those. It's usually the mind. These things are carried in the mind. You become your own worst enemy when you start doing bad karma, and that's the way it comes back on you. So this is the kind of thing we do in Buddhism. We work with the mind, and it's a very difficult task because we need to study the mind. Now, our minds are very confused things, and this is why we have to have this idea of insight. That is, we have to see the way the world works. We can't just develop good qualities. We have to actually be able to look deeply and see how the world is put together and how we are part of it. Part of it, the Buddha says, is to realize that we are not separate selves. It's something we kind of make up. In fact, we make up a lot of things, and this is a big hindrance for us. We make things up, and then we think that's the real world. And then we act on the basis of that. As long as we're doing that, we're going to do bad things. It's like driving blindly, or driving with a foggy windshield, when we don't see the way things are, but we see a world that we've made up in our own mind. So a simple example of that is one of the factors that's considered unskillful in Buddhism is lust. Okay, for a lot of people who grow up in the West, this sounds surprising because we think of, lust is a good thing. It's what gives spice to life. It makes life exciting. But seeking sensual pleasures. We think it's a good thing, but actually, if we look closely, we realize there's a problem with lust. One thing is, it often ends in a lot of harm. You think of what happens when people fall in love with somebody, and then something doesn't work out. You often end up with a lot of hatred, sometimes violence, sometimes murder and suicide that arises out of lust because we cling too hard. But lust happens in everyday experience. We like to eat things, we like to do this, we like to do that. The thing is, lust gets confused with pleasure. A lot of things in life are pleasurable. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. You go outside and it's a beautiful sunny day, the sun's out, and you experience pleasure. But that's not lust. That's the experience of pleasure. And lust is the craving for something in the future. It's the craving for a future pleasure. And the thing is, we spend so much time lusting after things that we forget how to experience pleasure. Usually by the time we get what we want out of lust, what our lust is directed toward, when we finally get it, we usually don't have enough presence of mind. We don't have the mindfulness to actually enjoy the pleasure. Instead, our mind is already in the future looking for the next pleasure. You see this. I've noticed a behavior. I don't know how many Burmese kids celebrate Christmas, but I noticed this when my kids were little. That relatives and everything would give them all kinds of presents. And they were so excited they couldn't sleep the night before. When you're excited, looking forward to something, you're miserable. It's not pleasurable, but you're looking forward to a pleasure. So the pleasure comes, and you get to open up all your packages. And what I notice is that for my kids anyway, they never stop to enjoy something. They would open up a package, they'd be very excited while they're opening it, and as soon as it was open, they put it aside and open the next package. So this is how we actually experience lust and pleasure. The lust dominates, and when the pleasure actually is staring us in the face, we don't have the presence of mind. We don't have the mindfulness to enjoy the pleasure. So we live in lust. Lust is painful. As long as the lust is there, it is pain. It has that suffering of that edge of suffering, and we don't notice that. We think we're having fun because we fail to recognize the difference between lust and pleasure. In Buddhism, we learn to put the lust aside, but be completely present for the pleasure. When life presents us with something, and it does that all the time. It's just, life is the whole world is a miraculous place. It's just full of these wonderful things. The flowers, the trees, the leaves rustling, the shadows that the leaves make on the ground. Sunsets, water, giving a lot of nature images, because those are, for me, very fundamental pleasures. And yet most people don't have the presence of mind. They cannot stay in the moment. So mindfulness practice will teach you to stay in the moment. Then you can experience pleasure, and then you can afford to put aside the lust. So this is a way our minds trick us. We think fun. Fun is this kind of mixture of lust and pleasure. It's exciting, but actually fun has this element of suffering in it, if you look at it. And so this is why we have to look at these things very, very closely, and why we do Vipassana practice, so that we can study ourselves. The Buddha also said, all unwholesome states have their root in ignorance. They converge upon ignorance, and by the abolishing of ignorance, all the other unwholesome states are abolished. Ignorance here, you can think of it as confusion, the mind making things up. All unwholesome states, which means our greed, our hatred, our lust, our anger, they have their root in confusion. They converge upon confusion. The states themselves will actually make us more confused. For instance, anger. And the abolishing of